The Emperor Caligula once declared himself a living god and ordered his soldiers to attack the ocean, collecting seashells as spoils of war. This was not an isolated act of eccentricity. It was a terrifying glimpse into the mind of a man twisted by absolute power, a mind that plunged the Roman Empire into an age of madness. In the gilded halls of imperial Rome, where the fate of millions rested in the hands of one man, the line between authority and insanity was dangerously thin. Power was not merely a tool of governance. It was a poison, a corrupting force that could unravel the most stable minds, transforming respected leaders into monsters. This is the story of how absolute power did UNT. Just corrupt, absolutely it drove emperors into the depths of depravity and delusion. This is the chronicle of Rome's mad empire. Our story begins with Gaius Caesar, better known by his childhood nickname, Caligula, meaning Little Boots. His early life was steeped in tragedy and fear, witnessing the systematic destruction of his family by the paranoid Emperor Tiberius. When Caligula ascended to the throne, Rome celebrated. The people believed they had found a benevolent ruler, a welcome change from the gloom of the previous reign. For a few brief months, they were right. He was generous, just, and beloved. But then, a severe illness struck him, and the man who emerged was a stranger. The sickness seemed to have shattered his mind, unleashing a monster. Caligula's reign descended into a nightmarish spectacle of cruelty and absurdity. He reveled in the fear of his subjects, famously wishing that the Roman people had but one neck, so he could sever it with a single blow. He hosted lavish games where senators were thrown to wild beasts and staged elaborate, pointless projects that bankrupted the treasury. He engaged in scandalous affairs with the wives of prominent citizens and even his own sisters, blurring all lines of decency. His most infamous act was his obsession with his horse. He gave the horse a marble stall, a jewel-encrusted collar, and even declared his intention to make him a consul, the highest office in Rome. It was a gesture of supreme contempt for the Roman elite, a demonstration that his horse was more worthy of power than they were. For 4 years, Rome endured his tyranny, living under the shadow of a ruler whose whims could mean life or death. The terror only ended when his own Praetorian Guard, the very men sworn to protect him, could bear no more and assassinated him in a palace corridor. Caligula's legacy was a chilling lesson in the hands of a broken mind. The emperor's throne was not a seat of honor, but a stage for horror. Just over a decade after Caligula's fall, another monster would take the throne, one whose name would become synonymous with tyranny. Nero, his path to power was paved by his ambitious and ruthless mother, Agrippina the Younger. She manipulated, schemed, and murdered to ensure her son would wear the purple. In his early years, Nero showed promise, guided by his wise advisors, Seneca and Burrus. But the insidious influence of absolute power, coupled with his own artistic vanity and paranoia, began to warp him. He grew to resent his mother's control, a resentment that festered into a deadly obsession. In a shocking act of matricide, he arranged her murder, a crime that haunted him and marked his definitive break from reason and morality. With his mother gone, Nero's darkest impulses were unleashed. He saw himself not as a statesman, but as a divine artist, forcing the Roman elite to attend his hours-long musical performances and poetry recitals. His personal life was a tapestry of scandal and cruelty. He divorced and later executed his wife, Octavia, and married his pregnant mistress, Poppaea, whom he reportedly kicked to death in a fit of rage. The defining moment of his reign was the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, while the city burned for 6 days. Rumors swirled that Nero had started the fire himself to clear land for his extravagant new palace, the Domus Aurea, and that he had fiddled while Rome burned. To deflect blame, Nero launched the first-ever state-sponsored persecution of Christians, subjecting them to horrific tortures. He used them as human torches to light his gardens and had them torn apart by dogs. His reign of terror alienated everyone: the Senate, the army, and the people. Faced with open rebellion and declared a public enemy, Nero fled Rome. His final words, as he took his own life: "Well, what an oddest dies in me?" He died not as an emperor, but as a delusional performer in a tragedy of his own making. A century later, the imperial madness returned with Commodus, the son of the philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius. Unlike his predecessors, Commodus did not inherit a throne steeped in intrigue. He inherited it from one of Rome's greatest rulers. He had every advantage, every opportunity to be a great leader. He chose instead to be a showman. Commodus had no interest in the tedious work of governing. He abandoned his duties, leaving the administration of the empire to corrupt favorites while he pursued his true passion, the gladiatorial arena. He saw himself as the reincarnation of Hercules, dressing in a lion's skin and carrying a club. He entered the Colosseum not as a spectator, but as a combatant, fighting hundreds of times. These were not fair fights. His opponents were often wounded soldiers or terrified amateurs, forced to fight the emperor in a rigged spectacle. He would charge the Roman treasury an exorbitant fee for each appearance, bankrupting the state for his own vanity. The Roman elite were horrified. For an emperor to perform as a gladiatorial role reserved for slaves and criminals was the ultimate disgrace. His behavior was a profound insult to Roman dignity. As his megalomania grew, he renamed Rome Coronia Commodiana, the city of Commodus. His reign was a circus of self-indulgence and neglect. And like the mad emperors before him, it ended in violence. Poisoned by his mistress and strangled by his wrestling partner, Commodus died not in a blaze of glory, but in a sordid palace conspiracy. If Commodus disgraced the imperial office, our final emperor defiled Rome's very soul. His name was Elagabalus, a teenage priest of an obscure Syrian sun god who was thrust onto the throne by his politically savvy grandmother. He arrived in Rome not as a Roman emperor, but as the high priest of Elagabalus, a god represented by a black conical stone. His reign was a 4-year assault on Roman tradition and religion. Elagabalus replaced Jupiter, the king of the Roman gods, with his own deity, and forced the highest officials in the state to participate in bizarre rituals. He built a grand temple for his god on the Palatine Hill and celebrated a sacred marriage between Elagabal and the Roman goddess Minerva, a shocking act of blasphemy. His personal life was even more scandalous. The ancient sources, though likely exaggerated, paint a picture of extreme debauchery. He married and divorced 5 women, including a Vestal virgin, a sacrilege punishable by death. He blurred the lines of gender identity in ways that profoundly shocked the conservative Roman society, reportedly seeking out physicians who could perform a sex change operation. Elagabalus's rule was not tyranny in the mold of Caligula or Nero. It was a wholesale cultural and religious revolution driven by a teenager's fanaticism. For the Romans, it was too much. The soldiers who had put him in power turned against him. He and his mother were assassinated, their bodies dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber River. A final, brutal rejection of their alien god and his mad priest Caligula, Nero, Commodus, Elagabalus. 4 different men, 4 different eras. Yet their stories follow a hauntingly similar pattern. They were men placed in a position of unimaginable authority, isolated from reality by a wall of sycophants and fear. Their power was a cage. It amplified their flaws, nurtured their paranoia, and ultimately drove them mad. They were not just evil. They were broken, their sanity shattered by a weight no single person was ever meant to bear. The Roman system, with its lack of constitutional checks and balances, allowed these unstable individuals to rule for far too long. Their reigns serving as a stark reminder that unchecked power is the most dangerous force in human history. It teaches us that the structures we build to protect ourselves from chaos must also protect us from those who lead us. For when a single mind holds the world in its hands, the fate of that world rests on the strength of that mind alone. And as Rome learned time and again, that is a terrifying gamble. The stories of Rome's mad emperors are a dark but vital chapter of history. Which of these rulers' twisted tales do you find most compelling? Let us know in the comments which emperor you'd like us to explore in a future deep dive. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the darkest corners of the past.